Tales of Estolia. Written by Sashina Kerfman. Volume 1. The Promise of Zacharias. Part 6. Prophecy. Chapter 1. Circus Freak. Los Angeles International Airport, 2022.
The quality of a woman's soul is reflected in the brilliance and colors of her aura. Deity promised, from the time of Zacharias, that guidance would be provided to grant clarity to all of his descendants and confirm the suitability of their chosen mate. Alessandro Octavius Zacharian, Capitulo 72.
Kenzie deftly slipped her shoes back on her feet, and then picked up her carry-on luggage. Pausing for a minute, she got oriented and then moved in the direction of the gate for her flight. She ignored the various looks being cast her way. She had grown used to the way people looked at her. She remembered what Mark said when he saw her.
"You look like a goddamn circus freak."
She focused in on the supercilious curl to his lip as he terminated their engagement and summed up everything she was lacking. He said,
"Mother Nature herself hates you. She even gave you 2 different colored eyes to prove it."
He went on to say that she was childish to have hair that went down to her waist. He added that the blubber at hip and bust, above and below her slender waist, made her look like a caricature of a woman. She was 6 feet tall, 2 inches taller than him.
A man wants to be needed. To feel as though his woman needs to be protected. He doesn't want a goddamn Amazon. A woman big enough to protect him instead. What man would look at you and think you're cuddly or attractive?
She arrived at her gate and found a convenient place to sit. She continued to remember that last conversation, especially the sneer on his face as he denounced her personality as too flamboyant, her intelligence as lacking, and her singing voice as too shrill. In all things, he summed her up as coarse, unattractive, lacking in proper femininity and, once a man got to know her, unworthy of marriage. Most of what he said did not bother her, but she had always felt too tall, too fat, and too strong a personality. She should have seen the writing on the wall once Mark met her cousin Sheila. Yet, for Kenzie, it was still a shock when he dumped her. When her best friend, Layla, begged her to take part in a before and after hairstyling and coloring competition, Kenzie agreed. By the end of the competition, her hair was a glorious rainbow, and her friend won the grand prize. The sponsors of the competition presented her with a half-dozen outfits, designed to mesh perfectly with her extraordinary coloring, and an all-expenses-paid week-long trip to Paris. And Mark used her new look as a reason to dump her. Kenzie shrugged off her memories and thought ahead to the new chapter in her life. With her new wardrobe and the 10-day vacation, she felt as though her future would hold some great new solo adventures. Mark's denouncement solidified her belief she was not marriage, or girlfriend, material. No, she thought to herself, she would not seek out romance in her future. There were plenty of things she could do in her life that did not include men. She would get a new job when she returned, possibly even move to a new city or a new state. For now, she was going to enjoy Paris. All other decisions would wait until she returned. There were still 2 hours before her international flight would begin boarding. Across the busy concourse was a lounge. She would get a drink. 10 minutes later she was standing next to the concourse sipping a rainbow concoction the bartender insisted she had to try. She idly watched the stream of humanity flowing back and forth in the busy airport. People were arriving from far distant places and heading either for the exits or for connecting flights. They were also arriving from the city to begin their adventures. Octogenarians and teenagers, women with babies, affluence and poverty, businessmen, newlyweds, solo flyers and large families, pilots and flight attendants, airport workers. Humanity in all its raw sizes, shapes, and situations. She amused herself by speculating on the lives of the people she saw, especially the men. One man had a roll of fat like a spare tire around his middle, almost perfectly emulated by the brown fringe of hair around a shiny bald head. His face seemed to settle naturally into smile lines. She imagined that he was a father of 3, with a little 8-year-old daughter grinning adoringly at him with one tooth missing. His wife would be sort of dull and uninspiring to others, but he would not see that. He would see her as beautiful and desirable. Kenzie turned her attention to another man who was probably in his mid to late 50s. His tank top showed off a long expanse of skinny, sinewy tattooed arms, and parts of his tattooed torso. His hair fell to below his shoulders and was lank and greasy, dark brown with more white and grey than the original color. She imagined him going to head-banging rock concerts in his younger years, and waiting for his music career ship to come sailing in and bring him glory, riches, and women, only to have it sail right by the pier of life upon which he was standing. A slender man with receding red hair and lots of freckles looked around like he was lost until a musical shout caught his attention. Before Kenzie could dream of what his life was like, a small blonde woman raced up to him and kissed him, oblivious of where they stood in the airport. With a blush, Kenzie turned her attention away from the couple. She wished some man would care for her as much as the redhead seemed to care for the petite blonde woman. The next person she noticed was a man in a business suit, a high-powered executive, she decided, coat slung over one shoulder, briefcase in his hand, walking slowly towards where she was standing, his thoughts clearly centered inward. He was looking directly at her but did not seem to see her. She decided that his thoughts were troubling him. He probably had some critical business decision he was faced with, and did not know whether he should make a leap of faith or do something conservative instead. He had very dark hair, dark eyes, and she thought he would sport dimples if he ever bothered to smile. He looked like he was in his late 20s or early 30s, tall, well over 6 feet, with very broad shoulders, slender hips, large elegant hands, and overall the sort of build Kenzie found attractive. Mark had a similar build, but compared to this man, Mark fell far short of her ideal. This man was her ideal. For just a moment, she had an erotic image of him in bed with her, their limbs intimately tangled, their bodies joined, and she had to look away with a slight blush. She glanced at her drink and sipped some more of the concoction. It was as good as the bartender promised, and it matched her hair and her dress. She smiled whimsically at her thoughts and looked up, ready to continue her people watching. Except now, standing in front of her, was the sexy man she had fantasized about. He did have dimples.
Hello,
He said to her. He took in her entire appearance, from her shoes to the curtain of rainbow-colored hair before his eyes met hers.
I saw you from a distance and I thought to myself that I have never seen a more incredible-looking woman in my life.
He spoke with a rich accent and sexy voice. After Mark's denunciation of her, the stranger's words were a balm for her injured soul. She grinned and returned the compliment.
Thank you, you're pretty incredible looking yourself.
He laughed. The sound trickled down her spine and lodged in her core.
Do you mind if I have a drink here with you? It is some time before my flight, and I should enjoy having the chance to relax for a moment with a beautiful woman.
She shrugged in acquiescence. 5 minutes later he was back with a drink, asking if she would sit inside the establishment, instead of sitting on the edge of the concourse. She followed him to an isolated booth. He sat across from her and smiled at her again.
My name is Nicodemus Luciano Zakarian. Please call me Nico.
She smiled and offered.
I'm Kenzie O'Rourke.
She felt a thrill to have this handsome man spending time with her, even though they were just two strangers who would never meet again.
It is a true delight to meet you. Tell me a little about you, Kenzie. It is obvious that you have a fascinating story.
His eyes lifted to the rainbow blast of color that was her hair. She had to laugh at that.
I'm not really.
She demurred. When he just waited, she said.
I'm 22, single, on my way to France for a vacation with only myself as company. I'm between jobs, and when I return I'll look for another job. I might move someplace else and find a job there. I work in customer support.
Is there not some extraordinary story about your marvelous look?
She shared with him the contest she volunteered for and how hers became the winning hairstyle, resulting in the vacation to Paris.
Have you recently divorced?
He touched the circle of lighter skin on her left ring finger. She frowned at her hand, at where he was rubbing the lighter skin with his thumb.
No, my fiancé decided I looked like a fat circus freak, and he traded me in for someone better looking.
A man singularly lacking in taste to so malign a woman as incredibly beautiful as you.
He raised her left hand to his mouth so he could kiss the circle of lighter skin.